So let's start a little bit by laying the groundwork. Talking about FISMA, it has this foundational piece of federal cybersecurity policy for over two decades, but much like government technology across the board, it's evolving in the response for today's challenges, from decentralized systems, emerging threats, and the need for real-time accountability. So we've pulled together this panel here. It's a very well-rounded panel with, we're touching different parts here of the FISMA ecosystem, from policy and standards to agency oversight to implementation and industry innovation. So you're hearing from different people with unique lenses into how this framework is being modernized, operationalized, and measured for impact. So to kick us off, I'm hoping each of you can briefly share a little bit about where you sit in the FISMA landscape and how your role is really connecting to the compliance environment. And from your perspective, why does FISMA still really matter today? So Vicki, since you're closest, why don't you get started?
Thank you so much, Anna. Good morning, everyone. How was your drive in today? I'm gonna hold my comments for later. My name is Yan Pillitteri, and I lead our security engineering and risk management research group at this little agency in Gaithersburg called NIST. We develop the standards and guidelines that are used as the foundation of federal cybersecurity risk management. And I think everyone on this panel has their opinions and probably uses our standards and guidelines. Listen, technology has changed. Our society has changed significantly in the last 20 years since FISMA originally came out. Now, with that said, I think there's a lot in FISMA that still holds true and still is relevant today, because it really dictates that agencies need to manage their information security risk. The mechanisms, the tools, the solutions that my colleagues are going to talk about for how they implement FISMA is going to be different. However, the role of NIST in FISMA still holds true. We develop standards and guidelines to enable this entire ecosystem to better understand and manage their cybersecurity risk.
Well, good morning, and my drive was challenging, let's say.
Icebreaker.
Yes. So, my role at GAO, being the Chief Information Security Officer, I get to a lot of times play two hats. So you'll hear me when I'm talking up here, either talk about it from an audit lens or talk about it from an implementation or operational lens, which is very interesting because I spent 20 years on the audit side. Now I get to implement a lot of those recommendations, challenges into GAO culture as well. So let me put it in the audit perspective, because I think that's really most valuable when we're looking at FISMA 853 and the implementation. Where I see a lot of the struggle is technology changes so fast. When we think about it from when FISMA first came out to really today, 20 years ago, technologies have drastically changed. Now, underlying when we think about the complexities of the OSI model and whatnot, nothing really has changed there, but the shift in the dynamics of, when we were thinking about it in 2004, maybe we had 100, 200 servers in an environment. Now with the scalability, especially in cloud environments, we're thinking thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. How do we scale that information? How do we collect all the information when we're thinking about CDM or zero trust models and whatnot? That's really the implementation challenge that we see going forward. So with that,
We'll just go down the line.
Sure. I guess I had the easiest commute just down the road in Vienna, so I had a wonderful stroll here. So my name is Richard Grabowski. I'm with CISA. I'm one of the program leads for the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program. So if you're part of the federal civilian executive branch sub-agencies, you've probably heard of us. We are the group that's codified in FISMA to offer technology solutions and approaches to modernizing continuous monitoring across the government. I've been with the program for about 10 years. It's almost a career in and of itself, just because it's an exciting place to be. I get to see all 94 agencies' problems and try to help them with it. One of the things that I love most about it is we are kind of the answer to, well, that's an unfunded requirement. Well, CDM often has the resources to help agencies solve a lot of the problems that you're going to hear about today. And I've been able to see it mature from just an idea to be codified as a level 1 acquisition program to something that's being used operationally even today in the FISMA automation that a lot of the federal civilian agencies have to do for FISMA reporting, and just seeing the dramatic change in culture through administration changes, through technology changes, through different ideas. And one of the things I'm super excited is that we get to help in many different ways, whether it's technical problems or non-technical problems. We get to work with industry, really get to put a lot of those good ideas to bear. And so I'm really excited to kind of talk with you all today, and thanks for coming.
And then last but not least, our industry POV.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. As CISO of Qualys, obviously my job is to create a security program that protects our solutions and our downstream customers. But I've been, I would say, heavily focused in my 20 plus years in the industry, heavily on the operations side, right? So previously ran all detection incident response for Microsoft across, the entire Azure, Office 365 infrastructure. And then a little taste of FISMA, I would say, in my time in the Navy. And then also as the CISO for the state of Colorado, we adopted initially what I would say a very FISMA-like governance model and legislation that you could pretty much just take FISMA and then replace it with state of Colorado instead of federal kind of agencies, and it was about an exact duplicate. With that said, I think, listen, FISMA is one of those great initiatives, with the intention of how do we govern and monitor the security of systems. And I think, coming more from like that warfighter operational standpoint, though, I think the question for me is, as an industry that provides solutions for this, is how do we free up people's time so that they're not writing static reports that lose value basically the minute they're published, because listen, we operate in a dynamic environment, and take a lot of that workload right off security teams who probably have other tasks that would be better used to go, protect systems, do threat modeling, maybe respond to incidents, whatever the case may be. So how can we as an industry, and I think the last panelist about AI, honestly, while I don't think AI will revolutionize everything, listen, there's some really cool stuff going on with AI analysis of documents, third-party risk management that can be applied to FISMA, things like that. So I think there's some very interesting things that the modernization of FISMA really allows us to dig in as an industry partner.
Yeah, that's great. And just to start from the beginning, FISMA actually lays out some very core cybersecurity requirements, like knowing your assets and really maintaining visibility across the board. But even those basics can be very complex and hard to tackle. So what do you all think makes those foundational challenges so hard for agencies to solve? Anyone want to take a swing at that first question? I can.
Culture, I think, is a big one. And again, having seen it for almost a decade, just seeing it's one thing just to have technologies, it's a completely different thing to trust it, to actually integrate it into your business processes. And it's further complicated by just the way that things have been done for many, many years, and trying to break that mold a bit. I think now more so than ever, I think we have to be able to rely on our technology investments and put them into practice, get up to speed on how they work, what their weaknesses are and their strengths, and use them appropriately. So I think that's been a large part of what we've been doing recently, is how do we work with agencies to, in the full amount of transparency, to say, well, here's how you can do things a little bit better. Sure. You're not giving any away control, you're not giving anything away, but just really embrace what the fit for purpose use cases are of these tools, so that you can kind of accelerate whatever it is you need to do to reduce your risk.
Yeah, I'll add one thing on that too. As you spoke about culture training, right? A lot of this is always about, how does IT security fit the mold? How does it build into the culture? But what about all those people at the endpoints, which really are the first line of defense? We do a lot of phishing emails and those type of things, trying to build, don't click on this, don't click on that. But at the end of the day, really what we're looking to do is how are we effective in our training, see something, say something that also applies to cybersecurity. So building that throughout the organization really changes the dynamics and allows people to feel safe in reporting, whether they do something malicious or not malicious, right? Some things they just happen to click. You see a URL, you just click on it. But changing that around to a reporting mechanism. How can you help out the SOC? How can you help out the various cybersecurity professionals in the organization react and respond to various cybersecurity threats?
Vicky, we're in this growing, complex IT environment. So I'm curious, how is NIST evolving its guidance to help agencies better adopt more agile, risk-informed approaches to compliance?
I think we have some really exciting new work. I think you just heard from Kat. One of the things we're looking at is how do we apply the standards and guidelines that you know and should love, maybe not, that you know, how do you apply that to new emerging technologies so we can translate what we already know to what's ahead? So we're really excited to kick off this effort on developing overlays for AI. We issued a blog post last week announcing this effort. We'll be standing up a community of interest, and we want to be hearing from stakeholders like you. What are those major use cases that you are interested in? How can we provide those foundational building blocks that give you a strong starting point so you can work with programs like Richard's to really build out that custom fit solution for your own agency, for your own organization? NIST will get you, I say 80% of the way there, and Richard will take you the last 20. But aside from those efforts like that, I'm really excited for this summer where we plan to announce some big efforts through our National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence on how do we empower risk management, how do we work with the federal and the vendor community to bring better solutions to our colleagues. You're not gonna, the risk management framework, the 853 controls aren't gonna go away, but they're gonna adapt to meet the current needs and the dynamic, and we're gonna continue to bring additional resources to address the training, the issues of understanding the culture and the value of risk management. So it's adapting the good stuff we have and coming up with some new innovative ways to reach our customer base.
That's great. And then Mark, from an oversight perspective, where do you see the biggest disconnects from policy and practice? And what cultural or structural issues make that real progress the most difficult or possible even?
Well, when we were doing audits, or when I was doing audits, I think the adaptation, right? When we start talking about the controls are really a framework, right? But it's not here you've accomplished this. Cybersecurity challenges, new technologies emerge, right? How does this adapt into the current framework that an organization has set forth? So, for example, patch management, easy one that every organization struggles with. What is the frequency? What is the risk, right? If we have Cat 10s that have come out, and quite a few have come out lately, where is the risk in, do we need to install it in 1 hour? Well, it depends, right? It depends on where it's sitting on your network. If it's all the way in, let's say, air gapped, then do we have a full risk? What is our maintenance cycle? So really the evaluative side of a lot of these different technologies in its various components. Other things, to really think about is like, for example, encryption. We're right on the border of cybersecurity. NIST has certainly released its quantum resistant, or at least the drafts of the quantum resistant cryptography. But what are agency plans to begin migrating into that so that when quantum resistant or quantum technology is breaking a lot of these old cryptography mechanisms, agencies are already ready and adapting to those new things. So thinking about it in not what it is now or where do we need to get to be stable now, but where do we need to go in the future?
Great. And then Richard, let's talk a little bit about CDM and your role. Obviously, it plays a key role in helping agencies improve visibility and continuous monitoring. How can agencies modernize their use of CDM tools to better secure those cloud-based and hybrid systems?
So I think the first thing that's worth demystifying a little bit is I think when people think about CDM, they think about it, here's a box that does a thing and like, good luck trying to use it. I want to kind of dissuade that notion that CDM is just a singular set of tools. I think of it more as a ecosystem of different capabilities that is more of a give and take with every single agency of how they want to use tools to meet certain risk management processes, right? So when we say CDM tools, those could be tools that we provide for you, help fund, help resource, help train, help get into your operations. They also could be tools that are very much known to agencies today that they say, hey, look, we already have a 80% solution or a 75% solution. We just need a little help on that 25%. What we are trying to do a much better job about is using what's there, especially the tools that the agencies are comfortable with, to make them more operationally ready. And so when we think about CDM tools, just think about tools that you would use for your risk management anyways. And from that perspective, I would offer, similar to what some of my colleagues had said today, just investing in your staff, investing in your own ability to use those tools if you are satisfied with them. They often have very good use cases that are built specifically for that tool. And then look at the ecosystem that they belong to. A lot of those tools have other different modules or other things that they can do that can help expand the similar type of capabilities to different asset classes, whether it's mobile security or cloud, which are very distinct from traditional endpoints, right? You have to know your product, you have to know your ecosystem, you have to know your capabilities in order to use them effectively across the broad digital estate that are at the agencies. And that just takes time and expertise, so invest in your staff to do that. Take advantage of programs like CDM. Take advantage of other programs where you can help get you kind of over the hump on some of those long existential problems. And then the other thing I would offer as well, and similar, again, a lot of the CDM tools that are out there today have similar kind of analogies. Invest and embrace the cloud native approaches. It's already difficult to do risk management and cyber hygiene if you are just using the tools natively. It's so much more difficult. You have to manage the infrastructure, have to build resiliency in that infrastructure, scale it out with on-prem technologies. It really does cause a lot of additional overhead that's really unnecessary at this point in time in 2025. So look for cloud native solutions, SaaS delivery models, where you can, and embrace that aspect as well.
Jonathan, we're going to talk a little bit about the private sector tools that your team and others are focused on, and I'm curious, where do you see the biggest opportunity for things like automation to be incorporated and to strengthen that compliance and reduce real risk and threats?
Yeah, and the good news is, FISMA is very reflective of what the private sector is trying to do. It just goes about it in a different way. In the example I give you, you can go to any large company and you say, hey, it's important that you know your assets. I don't think any CISO is going to be like, oh, shocking, right? Like I should do that. But also, that's a very difficult problem, right? And I think we talked about this earlier. Well, why is it difficult? Well, you could have multiple locations. You usually have a CMDB that's more generated for IT, doesn't necessarily reflect what the cybersecurity team needs. You have, hopefully, continuously deployed software every day, as opposed to these large monolithic applications that are traditionally built over multiple years. And so what does that mean? I mean, that means your assets are constantly changing, configurations are changing. And so one of the components that we're trying to do with our technology is to build in that idea of continuous risk assessment without having to do it manually. And that automation is, okay, knowing the assets you know about, identifying unmanaged assets from a cybersecurity standpoint. Hey, we didn't know about these. They don't have our stack on it. We consider that to be unmanaged. And then I think, as Richard said, for us, asset management, a lot of people try to pigeonhole it into, well, it's on-prem. Well, it's not. Like you need to know your cloud assets, and those are different because they're containers. They could be PaaS services. Either way, you still need to know what they are and where they're running at any given moment and what their risk posture is. Same thing for industrial IoT devices, right? It's still an asset, and again, I think sometimes as industry analysts, others will try to pigeonhole like, oh, you need a cloud-based asset system. You need an on-prem. No, you need to know all of your digital assets, right? And so I think, our goal is to obviously make that happen across your technology estate. It doesn't matter what the form factor, and to do it continuously, and so that's where the automation comes in, right? Instead of, having humans, I mean, definitely human in the loop is very important, but at the end of the day, it's doing that continuous risk assessment. Do I know about this device? Is it configured properly? What vulnerabilities does it have? What threat actors are targeting it, right? Summarizing, doing all of that work so that hopefully at the end of the day, right, your analyst, whoever's trying to make those final decisions, isn't spending their time collecting that. Because if a human had to do that, listen, you're either going to be paying a contractor or someone else a lot of money, to do that by hand, correlate that, bring your threat intelligence in. And so the idea is to do as much of that automatically as possible. And then the last step, I mean, it freaks some people out, but I think we're big proponents of auto remediation in some cases. And I'll give you an example for us. I mean, we do it at Qualys and know a lot of companies that do this. For your browser, why wouldn't you just auto patch? I mean, again, they're pretty stable. Now listen, there are some systems, and I have the luxury of telling my engineering team, if you're writing something that has a dependency on some old outdated, browser, then you should be fired, right? And I have the ability to influence that. Not everyone does, I get that. But, I think where you can, we want to make it possible to go all the way through auto remediation mitigation. So at some point, hopefully a lot of that workload gets put aside, and then teams can focus on those really hard things that there really isn't a solution for, that there's not an automated way of doing it.
Oh, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so, something that's always interesting is, automation's a great catchphrase, right?
Sure.
It plays well on the audio. It's so difficult to do, not for the technical reasons, although those challenges do exist, it's just the culture. And I'm
Sure.
gonna hit the culture one again. So part of what I would recommend as well is just taking that leap of faith, right? Like we've been doing things in a certain way for decades, and there's just this, I've done it that way, and that's my job. I can't necessarily take that leap of faith. I think part of the takeaway should be, I think we're compelled to, at this point, to start doing things differently, even if it has to be done and iterated upon just because it's not quite right there. We are certainly capable and have the technologies and the abilities to automate a lot of the things that are being done manually today. It just takes a little bit of good faith effort and a little bit of risk taking. And then I think it unlocks a lot of value and ceiling to do other things better. So that's the critical takeaway here is like automation shouldn't be a soundbite. Everyone should go back and see what can I actually automate. I've had so many conversations with CISOs and agencies and say, look, your number says 235,000. Like, well, it's actually 235,200, so I can't do this. I'm like,
Right.
we're talking percentages here. So yes, don't make perfect the enemy of good. We can do this.
Right.
And there's some takeaways hopefully in that soundbite.
Well, this goes back to the argument of what is driving the business, just in broad sense. Is it the business programmers that are driving cybersecurity, or is it cybersecurity that's driving business? Because we would never be off Windows 3.1 if the business was driving this. That again, this goes back to a culture change of here's the platform, here's the iterative patches, applying patches automatically, is really a challenge. But when things break, because ultimately things will, is it the cybersecurity issue, or is this a coding issue? Right, getting almost into the areas of, out of the, we're home coding everything or homegrown code for everything into low code, no code, where things are just readily updatable. Right. These are kind of the things that everyone is starting to move towards. Finally, there's still a lot of legacy code out there, but when we start thinking about it from, how do we install patches automatically? Now, what are the dependencies further on down the line at the either platform or the application layer to get us to where we need to be? Those are really the keys on getting over a lot of these humps.
Something that's really refreshing that all of the panelists have not touched on is a focus on compliance. And I think looking bigger picture, often I think FISMA is looked at as a compliance framework and a compliance regime, which is a very aggressive interpretation. All of this has been about risk management, embracing the technologies, embracing the culture, and making risk-informed decisions to better manage your cybersecurity and privacy risks. That means you're not locked into, I have to do this checklist of things. It's how do I take the data I have and make informed decisions in implementation, in educating my workforce, in rolling out solutions and technologies. So I really just wanted to focus on that bigger picture of FISMA really sets up that framework for understanding what you have and bringing in the right solutions to manage your risk rather than doing a checklist of God knows how many controls, right?
And one thing I would add, this is a great conversation. One of the reasons we've started this idea of a risk operations center is, and again, I've spent most of my career in a SOC, cyber defense. In there, you react every day, every minute to new things, new threats. On the risk side, unfortunately, we act like, hey, once a year we do an assessment, maybe that's enough. But you're dealing with the same dynamic environment. You're dealing with different threat actors, situations. Listen, administration priority may change and suddenly a huge investment in AI because, things change, and I think our idea is not a technology, but even part of a focus. Like, why don't we have that same level of daily focus, continuous monitoring on the risk side of things and doing proactive. And again, I loved your part on culture. I mean, the other thing, like I own patching at Qualys, and there are people that will say, hey, that's a conflict of interest. Why should security own patching? And it's like, when we looked at it, 90% of the patches we deploy are security. But maybe 10% are functional feature related. And then again, it's like, what's the conflict? Like, why is the CIO, do they not care about security? Like, they do as well, right? And then we have independent auditors who can audit, but if we do that, and for us, we said, listen, that sped up our ability to remediate just by making that little change and bringing those teams together. Now, again, people like, hey, you're crazy. That's not the right way of doing it. Because listen, for 20 years, we said, this is how you test. It's a different team. They sign off. But is that the right way to do it, right? Like, I mean, I think some of it, we just have to question these practices nowadays.
So this is a great conversation, and obviously we've seen a lot of changes in recent months with workforce shifts and leadership changes. Is now the time to continue to push that effort to shift from that checking the box compliance mindset to a more mission-driven, risk-based approach? And what can help drive that culture change that we've been talking about?
Wouldn't this is universal. This is a universal challenge regardless of administration or where you're physically working, right? The adversary is going to continue to evolve, and if we don't, we're going to be left behind.
Right.
Yeah,
So compliance is really the foundation. Risk management is where we need and want to go, and I think using some of these approaches that Richard, that Jonathan are touching on is how we get there. This is how we get visibility. This is how we get the data to make those informed decisions. That doesn't change.
Right.
I mean, I think right now, everyone that's in IT management or cyber management has a green light to find aggressive efficiencies, right?
Yep.
To get more people off of management and onto risk management mission. And there are an infinite number of ways to do it across the entire landscape, but it all has to start with a willingness to take risks, to do things differently, to invest in your staff and your expertise, to use what you have effectively, and build new processes that are more geared towards the 2025 landscape.
Yeah, I'll jump in a little bit with more of a kind of a solutioning side of this too. Think about it from the overall governance structures of what business applications and how they're being driven. Is it the business unit, is the coders, programmers, are they driving it with relation of whoever is the sponsor of this? But are the cybersecurity professionals involved in those business discussions, right? What is the potential impact? Because if they're not, then cascade down the line, what happens when it's already being coded and something just can't be done? They're left to either accept the risk or say, no, we can't do it this way because of X, Y, Z. So, but if you shift that model to the cybersecurity professionals in those same business discussions, then you're actually gaining efficiencies in the entire process. Everyone's starting to have an equal lens, an equal treatment of whatever it is that the business processes or the requirements need. It's just going to speed up time to market, building whatever the product is all the way downstream.
It's much easier to build a secure solution than bolt on some stuff later.
Absolutely.
So if agencies could focus on one action for the next year to really move the needle on FISMA modernization, what would you recommend? Vicki, do you want to start?
Okay, no pressure. Lean into understanding risk and be willing to accept some risk. You can't continue to do the same thing and expect different results.
So I'll actually go with two because they're really interrelated. Training and governance. Because once people are trained across the board, then the governance structure just kind of naturally occurs, that everyone starts consciously thinking about cybersecurity requirements in what it is they're doing. No longer are they getting a data stream for unknown what data. Now we're thinking about, okay, how do we ensure the sanitization of data? How are we ensuring the programming of it all the way down the stream? It just creates that efficiency, throughout the life cycle.
So I'll say kind of a multi-part here. Find your authoritative sources and then parlay that into reasonable automation goals. And what I mean by that is every agency has a series of tools that they use for whatever business practices or risk management practices they have. Find out which of those are your truth signals to help you understand risk in your enterprise, and then set some very reasonable goals on how you can use those investments to automate. And I would use, for my civilian colleagues here, the FISMA yearly reporting process, right? There are about 18 to 19 different metrics and measurements that are in there that can be automated through CDM or through your own tools. And then challenge yourself of that 19, how many can I fully be hands-off without a human in the loop to have those authoritative sources answer those questions for me? And how many of those can I get done by the end of the fiscal year? That's what I would challenge people to do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously being a little bit from the outside, but I think the focus would be, I love the continuous nature, right? Moving from really this, once a year to, and again, what I like to call continuous risk ops, right? Like you need to have a continuous ops tempo on the risk side.
Great. Any final thoughts? Final takeaways?
I'm with Vicki. I think the idea that FISMA is just compliance activity is a little bit of a negative connotation. I think compliance is incredibly healthy for a good active cyber hygiene process. So those are reasonable goals, and you can't do some of the things that the other people have been talking about this morning unless you have those basics, the blocking and tackling down. So,
But compliance is not enough.
yeah, absolutely.
There's lots more we could talk about, and we have a day full of more conversations, but a round of applause for our fantastic panel.